Like, what are you sending us in the gold box?
Well, I'm going to interrupt your conversations to welcome you to the library. I'm Chris Casbohm, I'm the library director. This is Banned Books Week. We commemorate this week every year because we oppose censorship. We honor your intellectual freedom, your freedom to read, your freedom to tell your story. And so we always try to make something of this week to raise awareness. And a lot of times people talk to me, they think that banned books is something that happens in some other country. And so I looked it up. There were 530 challenges to books reported to the American Library Association in 2018. And that's just the ones that were reported. People also often think it's about one book or one author, as the current case in Tennessee where Harry Potter has been banned. That is sometimes the case. But often it is about banning a particular point of view. It is about telling a story in a particular way, or molding a school curriculum in a particular way. So there are a lot of reasons books are banned or challenged, and it happens in public libraries and in school libraries and even once in a while in academic libraries. And it's censorship, and as I said, we oppose censorship. So we try to raise awareness during this week and to have conversations like this. We're very happy to have a speaker today who has been an advocate for books and for authors, for intellectual and cultural freedom. So I'm going to ask Dr. Richard Reitsma, of the Chair of the Department of Modern Languages, to introduce our speaker. Richard.
So thank you all for coming out. I really appreciate having a nice crowd for Tony. He came all the way from Houston for this. And we had beautiful weather for him too. He was so fresh. He came with a jacket and a sweater, and I'm like, actually, dude, like it's cool. And so this is our opening event for the fall Sesquicentennial Borders and Migrations event. And there's, let's see, there's like 7 or 8 events coming up. And all of them are on the back table there, so when you get your food, get a flyer. One of the flyers lists everything, and there's even a lovely QR code on there, so you can like have your phone remember it for you. We got some really exciting things coming up, including Joanna Williams from the Keno Border Initiative, where we actually have students go and accompany migrants at the border, and she's going to do a bunch of workshops and a talk here. And you can learn about what Canisius is doing in response to the Borders and Migrations crises. There will be a display in the library in the month of October, actually 2 displays in the library in the month of October about that. The English department is also bringing in a writer whose book is called The American, which is a really great book, and that'll be also in October. And then in November, to close out the fall season we have a book by Deborah Cantor about Chicago Catholico and the transformation of Chicago diocese into Mexican diocese, essentially. So I'm really happy that we could get Tony here. I've been at Canisius now 8.5 years, and the very first banned book week I participated in, I gave a talk about Tony and Libro, Traficante and the book smugglers. And people looked at me like, what the hell? And I'm like, yeah, no, they walked into schools and literally took books out of students' hands because it was forbidden to teach Mexican-American studies in general in Arizona. And people here didn't believe me. And I'm like, but like Tony's, like, this is real. And so I tried to bring Tony here, but back in the day I didn't have any money. But eventually I've gotten to some funds that over time have allowed us to do a lot more programming. And I was like, you know what, we're doing this Sesquicentennial, and we've got the banned book weeks, and so I contacted Tony. So do you think we can do it this time? And so here he is. And I'm really excited to have him talk because he's sort of, I feel like he's my brother in the fight. And our politics are really aligned, and our anger and rage is aligned, and so like I feel muy simpático, right? Tony Diaz, who goes by El Libro Traficante, which is the book smuggler, because he actually smuggled books from Texas into Arizona. Amazing as that sounds. And this was not that long ago. This was like 7 years ago that it started. He's also the founder of Nuestra Palabra, which at one point was the large Latino, Hispanic, Chicano book fair. 300,000 people at the last one? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so 300,000 people showing up at the Astrodome?
The George R. Brown Convention Center.
And then the last one that they were going to do got interrupted by the Hurricane Maria and all the refugees coming from, so that got canceled. But that is a part of the story that Tony will tell you about. He's got a podcast, excuse me, he's got a podcast that, Mark, you can link to on our homepage for that. And regularly debates on a center, right, and left program about politics. He's good at sort of getting under the skin of the right wing. A prolific writer and activist, and some of his books are here in the library, right there. And actually, these are a bunch of the books that were banned under the Arizona law, and I'm very proud to say that I've taught most of those books here at Canisius. So, and so here's Tony to tell you about the good fight and how we're going to do it.
Thank you very much. Before I start the talk, I really do want to thank you for being involved in fighting for educational pursuits, intellectual freedom, and I do want to let you know, we're talking about the Archdiocese, Catholic universities, Catholic high schools. So my parents were migrant workers in Texas, and I'm the youngest of 9, but I'm the first in my family, first male to go to high school, first person to graduate from college. You know, when I told my parents I was going to get a Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing, they didn't know what that was. But they, my father wound up getting a job with the railroad and Inland Steel in Chicago, and I know folks from Buffalo know a little bit about that whole era of steel and the Industrial Revolution. That changed our family's lives because we were no longer pickers. So I was the last of the kids, and when we get to Chicago for that different lifestyle, which for us, we were rolling in it. We went from off the charts to lower middle class. This was huge for our family. It also meant I could go to school. So for us on the south side of Chicago, we were one of the first families in that neighborhood. My parents sent me to St. David's School, Catholic school. And you know, that was the best education you could get for middle class in Chicago. I went to high school, the LaSalle Institute, run by the LaSallian brothers. So of course we had that mission of service there in the heart of Southside Chicago, doing a lot of what you're doing now, which is fantastic, helping undocumented folks, helping workers, helping, you know, soup kitchens, etc. And my undergraduate is at DePaul University in Chicago, another Catholic university. So I really, I believe in all those missions. I'm going to depress you now. Because I don't have to research if that stuff works. When I tell my students, I'm teaching you, I'm not here for a job. I'm here because this is mission level work. I'm going to change some lives today. Might be yours, might not. If I change your life today, you can feel free to tell me now. Come back in 5 years. Do your thing, I'm going to do my thing. But I'm not playing. This is like transformational, exciting work that we're engaged in. And it's changed my life to a manner now where it's like, you know, now it's a chance for me to be part of this same literature I studied. But I do want to thank you because there are forces at work that would like this to stop. You know, sometimes they pick on a certain group, sometimes others, but it is a threat to intellectual freedom. And again, I firmly believe it's because there's some folks that are threatened by our intellectual progress. So first I want to just say, really great to connect with you. We are on the same team because education changes the world. And I just want to repeat it one more time because on a bad day when you can't find parking, we're going to circle 4 times for parking and stuff like that. You know, you're short on time and you know, you got to cut off other things you want to do to come here, be it to study or be it to teach. This is amazing work that we are all doing together. And it is important, and we're changing the world in different ways. That's why people are mad at us too. So. what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna tell you about the actual fundamental pillars of this band of ethnic studies in Arizona. And I want to start with some of the resources as well. I know you have many of them. I kind of want to put those out there because it can get very, very complicated, right? But this is actually from the webpage that I built. Little plug for the humanities. So especially nowadays, when I talk to students that want to be English majors, but their parents are forcing them into STEM. And don't get me wrong, I'm on the opposite side. You know, my son broke my heart and didn't want to become a poet. He wanted to become this aerospace engineer. Okay? You're like, fine, you're going to struggle with that. No. So I totally get it. But when I see young folks that really don't want to, my son loved calculus, go figure. I mean, he just loved it. You know? But when other students don't love calculus, and their parents are like, you need to go study that thing, I'm like, I fundamentally believe, let us learn what we love, enjoy, and good things will come from it. We might finish that undergraduate degree sooner, and I'm sorry, a Chicano with a master's degree, I'm money, you know what I'm saying? It's like, I'm money, baby. It's like, you know? And then, the other thing I want to add as well, too, I get it, too. Where I get scared and nervous, when I plunged in to get my Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing, I had my bachelor's degree in Chicago. I had a job I was supposed to love, and I hated it. And I'm like, I don't think my parents braved the Rio Bravo. I don't think my dad lost his sense of smell at the railroad. So I will die in this cubicle from a stroke and bored, and wonder what I could have done. I'm like, at my age, my dad had a family to take care of, didn't speak English, didn't have a degree, and came to a country where he didn't know if he had any work. I think I'm going to be okay. But I also fundamentally believe we're in an era where the humanities will prepare us for upheaval, change, and translation. That's what I got good at as a kid. That's what we've been delivered to. And I will say this as well. To our colleagues that have bought the argument that these STEM degrees are all that exist, I'm visiting you from Houston, Texas, where petrochemical companies have invested in community colleges, promised jobs, and just a couple years ago, when the price of oil dipped, they are as fanciful about their jobs as they accuse us of being about ours. And I saw it before my own eyes. So here's what I'm saying. Here's a commercial for the humanities. For my field, I got a Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing. You will not see a want ad for novelists in the newspaper. And I didn't have a wealthy family to fall back on, but I was delivered to the tools that would help me function and thrive in an era that needed my community and the skills we teach in humanities. And I think that is the case. I think what we do is really vital, especially now, because that upheaval is coming to everybody. Every industry is not safe from it. However, we can mitigate those things. And I say that because, yes, I'm a published author. Yes, I've been published in national publications. They don't publish what I want to write all the time. So now in this era, from the humanities, I learned to create websites, blogs, videos, social media, and that helped us with the Libro Traficante caravan. But I want to point out to you that just some resources first. So this is the website, tonydiaz.net, and basically, I've given myself a challenge this year, because I do want to be a writer. I'm a writer, and writers have to write. So this year, I've been publishing one essay per week, every Tuesday at 2, Tony, Tuesdays at 2, see what I did? Tony's Tuesday at 2, see, clever. And to push myself to write. Now mind you, if you're getting an MFA in creative writing, that's not fly. It's like, oh my God, you published a blog, awesome. Like, no, they want you in the New Yorker, the Atlantic, etc. They frown upon that. However, at this stage too, the same publications that are venerated don't publish the stories that I want to write. And at this stage too, because I'm a cultural accelerator, I don't need that single publication. And for me then, practicing my voice to get it out. Secondly, on the webpage too, I've enjoyed putting together different contexts, they're like research papers sort of, but we control the narrative. And then, again, we have to argue for what we're pushing. When people critique, as they will, zines, I think zines are amazing. Poets have a tradition of self-publishing work, blogs, but again, all these sometimes are disparaged. And when I have to go there, I say, but I'm on TV every week. Have you read my textbook? Let me text Sandra Cisneros right now. You know what I'm saying? It's like that's what we are as cultural accelerators. That's what I've received from my Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing, is that I don't need those folks. I can then take our cultural capital, right, and we invest in. Now, the other cool thing too is that people look up to the Atlantic. Here's a quote that I gave in one of the interviews about the Libro Traficante. It is clear to me that our intellectual advancement is a threat to some people because they tried to make it illegal. And let's make no mistake, on Advanced Book Week, we need to remember a state in America passed a law banning Mexican American studies. There were 4 points to that law. The most egregious, that got the most attention, is that the law accused Mexican American studies of promoting the overthrow of the government. Rich, what are you doing? What are you up to? Overthrow the government? Ay, ay, ay. And some of them were really radical texts like House on Mango Street by Sandra Cisneros, right? pretty radical stuff, right? And when the law came out too, I had to go back and say, where did Sandra hide those secret messages? Was it naming the person Esperanza? I guess that means hope, so like, is that radical? The word government's not even in there. But it was clear then that first point was supposed to scare people, make them think that these books in the hands of young Chicanas and Chicanos were bad. And again, when I was younger, my parents told me not to hang out with the gangbangers, don't hang out with those gang kids. Why? Because they're bad. Well, it turns out they led me right into the hands of evil, because those book people too evidently are plotting something. That was really offensive to me. There's a second component. I won't get into all of them. There's a second component. It prohibits courses that treat students as a group and not individuals. I think that's the most sinister part of that, believe it or not. Mostly because then it's saying that we will not cater to a community, and it's separating individuals from communities, which, if you study our literature and community, we define ourselves within others. I know compadre sounds like a cool drinking term. That's my compadre. There's actually a very strong extended family relationship based on a very formal act of becoming someone's compadre. And again, defining yourself within that relationship. And I think that is the battle between cultural capital and individual capital. So, going back to some of my tricks and the resources, again, when people disparage posts, they won't say it to my face, of course. When they say, hey, that's down, I say, well, really? You like the Atlantic? Because, this is from our story in the Atlantic. So who's flying now, brother? Who's flying now? You want to listen to the reason? By the way, that's cultural capital, battles for cultural capital. Titles like degrees, where you're published, awards, but you're writing. So I also want to go back to that. These movements are meant to keep you from writing. So the challenge that I want to leave you with are 3 things, and then we're going to go off in different directions. Here are the 3 challenges. 1, you can invest in your own cultural capital, which we all benefit from. If you invest in your cultural capital, we all win. One, you need to read and write. Sounds simple. Think about that. Wait, a month from now. Any writers in the room besides me? Any writers in the room? Two of us. That means there's five, yeah. Because everyone's like, I don't know, I kind of write, kind of don't write. It's hard to find time to write, correct?
Oh, yeah.
And at the end of the day, if we have not written, no one's like, oh my God, you didn't write. We have to make the most of our time and energy to create those words, and then those words have an effect. There's many different strategies to keep us from exercising our voice. And when that doesn't work, there's even more obvious approaches to it. But the real attempt is to thwart our agency. So, going back to that, the three things you need to do would be to read and write. That's pretty, it's pretty simple. Second one will be volunteer. And that could be volunteer for a student group, volunteer for an activist group, volunteer across the board. But you are giving your time and energy, and that is cultural capital. My parents didn't have time to, again, just to sidestep and tie this into, I know you're taking folks to work with some of the folks that are in the detention centers. I hear a lot about people, I'm going to be a little more, Mexicans don't want to learn English. Mexicans don't want to learn English. When that occurs, and I will go on any radio show that invites me, and some folks have a different political bent, and for some reason they think they're going to trap me, and I'm like, I'll go there, I'll go with you. I'm happy to visit. I tell folks, I probably know more immigrants than you've ever met. My parents were immigrants. I've yet to meet one immigrant that's like, I'm not learning English. Of course in Spanish. Never met one yet. And in fact, my job as a kid was to learn English as quickly and as well as possible to translate the outside world for my parents. Now I would argue, now I translate our community for the rest of the world. So that was my job. I do know immigrants who've been humiliated for their accents, adults who are shamed and embarrass them to try again. I do know a lot of families who do not have the money to pay for classes, and even if they did, don't have the time because they are working to survive. So I say all that then, I have the luxury of investing my time and energy. That is your cultural capital. And if you have time to give up your time, which is true to many of our missions for different reasons, that is valuable. But I also want to point something out. Do not underestimate that. That is a powerful gift, and that is part of your cultural capital. For our book fairs, at one point we had 300 volunteers. And this is for our book fairs. But I didn't realize we're preparing to become book smugglers. Because from there we're learning a lot of tactics, learning who's a leader, learning our capacity. But it was powerful and valuable, and we would wind up investing some of that later. The third thing is to, once you got money, donate to nonprofits and other organizations. Because at the end of the day, cultural capital is powerful, but the light company wants actual capital, as you can imagine. There's actually a link to our radio show every Tuesday. Let me give you another resource, which I'm sure you might have, but I want to make sure you have access to it so we can talk a little more about this. Again, this is a less fancy website than we had before, but our websites would get attacked. Every time the Libro Traficante made national news, our websites would get attacked, and we build it up from scratch again. So we stopped investing in the fancy ones. Homestead has a very straightforward web builder. It's not fancy, but they don't get hacked as much because that's their bread and butter. Now, if you go to LibroTraficante.com, you can also get a list of all the banned books. We're leaving this up here forever. And to put it into context, we're talking about challenging books. So just to remind you, challenging books it's a little complicated, right? So if you're a book banner, you got to go to the institution. I say, hey, I'm a book banner. Can I get your book challenging form, and like, well, here's your form. Everyone knows you're a book banner. I guess you got to read the book, although they don't always read the book. You got to read the book. You have to fill out the form, turn it in. People look at it. Your newspaper writes about you. The Arizona ban was challenging 80 books at a time. So in 2012, they passed that law, and then they enforced it. And these were books that were the gold standard for ethnic studies. So in Tucson, they had a terrible dropout rate, like every basic large city with a large Latino population. They had a criminal dropout rate. In my humble opinion, any major city with double-digit dropout rate, that's criminal, I think, in my opinion. They had a terrible dropout rate. They instituted ethnic studies, and the graduation rate jumped up to 98%. So for 6 years, they were thriving. And there had been 4 attempts to pass this terrible un-American law. The first 3 times it was thwarted at the legislation because then Governor Napolitano, Janet Napolitano, who you may remember goes on for the Obama administration, that law reached her office 3 times. This is why elections are important. And she would not sign that law. She goes off to the Obama administration, and in comes the next governor, Jan Brewer. And if you may recall, or you may not recall, Jan Brewer was also very active with the anti-ethnic studies laws, SB 1070, also referred to as the Show Me Your Papers law. She was very active in that whole movement, and that anti-immigration law, as you may or may not recall, spread to other states. So all of a sudden Alabama had a Show Me Your Papers law, Georgia had a Show Me Your Papers law, and it spread. So when she was presented on that 4th try, when Arizona legislature passed this law banning ethnic studies, going after Mexican American studies, she signed it. And how it was enforced, this is the shocking part we chatted about. In 2012 is when they enforced the law. And how they did this is they walked into classrooms, and while class was in session, in front of our young, started boxing up books by some of our most beloved authors in front of the youth. Which, I mean, to me, that to me is psychological warfare. And that did not make national news. The students started reporting on it through social media, blogs, and then we started hearing about it in Houston, Texas. And again, Nuestra Palabra, when I founded Nuestra Palabra in 1998, I'm like, let's become book smugglers someday, Maybe someday we got to do something nuts. No, it was more that we were convening for what we're doing now, right? And we knew it was important. So we heard about it from the students, but we were profoundly offended, especially because our cultural capital was being attacked. In that Nuestra Palabra had these massive book fairs, but authors like Sandra Cisneros, we are in a Chicano renaissance where a Chicano can read Sandra Cisneros, I can look up to her, we can host her at our book fairs, on our radio show, she can become a mentor and a friend. That to me is huge. That's powerful for our moment. Dagoberto Gil, Sandra has 2 books on the ban list. Dagoberto Gil's got 2 books on the ban list. Also another mentor of mine, and I think of him like a brother now. And he was on the Mexican Studies curriculum in Tucson. And of course, I knew he wasn't trying to overthrow the government, and he helped a lot of people get their MFAs, etc. So the other part for me was that this was profoundly offensive because it was like attacking our family. But in 2012, our group was 14 years old. So we had 14 years of bringing our community together just for the sake of the love of books, like we're doing right here. Right? It wasn't an emergency. We were just hanging out because we had a common theme. Just to tell you about Nuestra Palabra, at our 21st anniversary this April, packed house at the Museum of Fine Arts Houston, and we were celebrating some young authors they read their first poem on our stages, and we celebrated that they're having their books published. That's how awesome our group is. One of our writers is a writer for Associated Press now. Another, Alvaro Sarrios, his first time he read was on stage. He was on the front page of the Houston Chronicle. That's cultural capital, by the way. When people go from, why are you writing, to, oh my God, you're the writer. And that's powerful. And his family sees it, his neighborhood sees it. So we don't even know who else is like, oh, writing's pretty cool. He does classes now. He's a tenured professor now. He gets paid to do plays. He wrote an opera. He got paid to do the Spanish translation of some operas in Houston. That's how we roll. But we just did that because it's the right thing to do and fun. We took some of those skills then, and in 2012, we said, well, you know what? If Arizona's gonna ban these books, we're gonna smuggle them back. And we said, and by the way, there's 5 of us: Brian Parras, Liana Lopez, and their names are up here. Brian Parras, Liana Lopez, Lupe Mendez, Laura Torres, and then I think I said Lupe Mendez. Together, we were the founders of Libro Traficante, but they had all had a role in the book fairs. So Lupe Mendez was in charge of all our volunteers. Laura Torres does pedagogy. But then we came together and launched this whole project, but using all the skills we had accumulated. Social media, of course, in the MFA programs, they were pushing that, but we didn't care. That's what our community wanted. We had been working on that. And we had this group that was ready to roll, and we were used to organizing big events. Again, when you're starting projects, when we first started Nuestra Palabra, other Latinos would be like, Latinos don't like books. Well, feel free not to come. Okay, so we're having this awesome event. You can step to the left or to the right, but this train's moving. We're having this big event, and feel free not to come, but we're doing it. And our first event was packed. But we learned the audacity, and we learned how to organize. So what we did is we started planning and said, okay, let's do this caravan. So, and I'm going to show you some videos then too. Again, one of the other resources. Here's the whole list. Another argument for PhDs. Of course, if just someone from the community puts a list together, that doesn't count. You know that, right? Well, it counts to us. So a Chicana from New Mexico, Dr. Len Romero, she made an annotated bibliography. Oh, and all of a sudden, now it counts. It's like, now it counts, right? We're like, oh, wow. Just like we did when we were kids, she translated it to the rest of the world. And again, I love how this works. On our website, she came to us. We met her in New Mexico. Here's some of the perks. Is Rodolfo Anaya's book on there? No? Oh, yeah. Excellent. Bless mi última. On the Libro Traficante caravan, we stopped in Albuquerque at Rodolfo's house. We did shots with Rodolfo Anaya, right? And he said, occupy Arizona. We're like, yeah, let's go. But we met her there, and then she basically took the simple list and made an annotated bibliography. I think Rodolfo, where's Rodolfo? Yeah, there's Rodolfo's book right there. But on our website, we get a lot of calls from scholars who are doing the research. And scholars research us now. We're community members that invested in our cultural capital and wanted to cultivate it. Good things will come from it, and people are waiting for it. And of course, people are also using it. We don't even know who they are, but it is key. And I also want to go back to this key fact. We got to let America know that in our lifetime, there was a movement to ban our history and culture, and we should not forget that. We all should know that our community got together with allies to overturn it. Here too, then we're going to keep this here forever. Is the whole caravan route, and actually, a graphic designer at one of the newspapers that covered us came up with this cool graphic. Charlie Ruby from the El Paso Times, and this is they made a little book, kind of cool. And this is the route that we took into Tucson. Of course, especially now, and I have a special love for the people of El Paso, especially now they had that slaughter there. I want to point this out as well. That terrible manifesto. I read it. I read the terrible manifesto. It was ugly. very, very racist, but it was stereotypes. Stereotypes are killing us. Art, history, and culture humanize us. And that's what we do. We humanize each other. We humanize people. We teach people to respect each other just through these simple acts of respecting voices. It really broke it was very touching what happened in El Paso because they were so welcoming to us and always have been a real place of support. And it is very international. If you're ever in El Paso, a lot of times my cell phone will switch to Mexico carriers because it's like right on the border. But again, this is there for the sake of history. And then here's some of what we started underground libraries, believe it or not, we had to have underground libraries. And then I'm going to ruin the ending for you and then show you some videos. I'm going to ruin the ending. A young Chicana named Maya Arce and her colleague Karina Lopez sued Arizona. As far as instruction in the classroom, I will actually, even if I'm teaching at a community college with freshman students, we will watch the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals oral arguments on the law, right? And of course, my students are always terrified when I say that. They're like, Mister, we're not lawyers. I say, you will get an A for homework if you write down 3 words or sentences that catch your attention. Okay, I kid you not. Every class I've shown that to has something to say after they watch it. And what I love is we were there. We helped fundraise to get Maya's family to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. And when I teach research, I'm like, I'm not playing with you. The research we teach you changes the world. We've changed the world. We've changed the policy. This stuff works. And if you would have been asleep, this law would have stuck and spread. And that's one thing that we did together. And then if you go to the first page, right, the home page. If you go to the bottom, that's our podcast. You can actually click right here, and you can actually watch the oral arguments right there. I will give you one highlight, which my students always catch. Again, when I call it a racist un-American law, that's not my opinion. As we're at the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, one of these judges said, it sounds like discrimination. You know, when you don't want a whole ethnic group to progress, it sounds like discrimination. And at that point, I'm like, great, we're not crazy. Because there was an attempt to make us all look crazy at the time. And again, I'm going to ruin the ending. This terrible law gets overturned in 2017, and the opinion said this was implemented with discriminatory intent to advance political careers. This is not my opinion. I am merely reading to you forensic evidence from the law annals of America. But again, as my students watch this, they are stunned at the proceedings of the highest levels of court and what people were pushing. But what I love is we've been involved in making history. Okay, so those are some of the resources. Again, you've got the banned book list. I'm so glad you've been teaching some of those courses. You've got the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals as a document, tons of essays. You've got the actual work. Let me show you some cool videos though. So when I'm also teaching a class, I'll show them this particular video that talked about the banning early on, and we can chat about it, and then I'll show you our video in response.
One thing. Your children's education. Nothing is more important. You want them to learn enough to do well in the world, but not so much that they can win arguments with you. But what are they really learning in school? Al Madrigal followed this eye-opening story.
Across the country, public education is failing. But in Arizona, lawmakers have found the solution to the biggest problem facing their schools.
Arizona's Governor Jan Brewer just approved a bill banning ethnic studies classes in public schools.
And using this new law, the Tucson School Board banned the K-12 Mexican-American Studies program. School Board member Michael Hicks.
My concern was a lot of the radical ideas that they were teaching in these classes, telling these kids that this is their land, the whites took it over, and the only way to get out from beneath the gringo, which is the white man, is by bloodshed.
When you sat in on these classes, what types
I
of...
chose not to go to any of their classes. Why even go? Why even go? I base my thoughts on hearsay from others, so I based it off of those.
With powerful evidence like hearsay, the Tucson School Board had little choice but to end the Mexican American Studies program, protecting kids from dangerous teachers like Curtis Acosta.
Our students are much more likely to graduate and go to college. Their test scores have improved. And most of all, they're excited about education so they can pursue it in their future lives.
And you do that by teaching them to hate white people.
We don't teach them to hate white people. What we're trying to do is provide a more complex version of what has happened in our past so that our students are engaged and they can ask themselves critical questions and build their own understanding.
Critical thinking, more like critical brainwashing. And it gets worse.
They would, every week, go out and buy burritos and feed these kids.
What?
Yeah. What that does is it builds a more of a bond between the teacher and the students.
Sure, I'm loyal to this guy because he
Right.
bought me burritos.
Right.
You slip your burritos to kids, don't you?
Why would be giving food to our youth be something that frowned upon?
When the program goes away, the burritos go away. That's why these kids are upset. No mas burritos.
It's pretty offensive.
And now that they've eradicated Mexican American studies from the schools, they can focus on other ethnicities.
Honestly, this law won't be applied to any other of our courses. It was strictly written for one course, which is the Mexican American Studies program. And nobody has complained about any of the Pan-Asian or any of the other courses that are being taught.
What about the African American Studies program?
The African American Studies program is still there. It's not teaching the resentment of a race or class of people.
I'm a black kid. Try to teach me about slavery without me feeling resentment towards white people.
How am I going to teach you about slavery? Slavery was...
How did I end up here?
Slavery was Okay, the white man did bring over the Africans.
And what kind of jobs did we do?
The jobs that you guys did was basically slavery jobs.
So after we were freed, we got to vote?
Yes. You you didn't get to vote until later.
And we were equal?
Almost equal.
What, we were like sort of a half or 3/5?
My personal perception of it, I would say you're probably a quarter.
The more he taught me about black history, the more I realized Arizona has figured out the right way to teach it.
We now have a black man as a president. You know, Rosa Clark did not take out a gun and go onto a bus and hold up everybody.
Sadly, the peaceful lessons of Rosa Clark are lost on the radical reactionaries teaching Mexican American studies.
I think this is a great country. In some countries, I might be actually locked up for teaching the way I have. And well, in this country, I'm just banned from doing it.
Very close to getting locked up. Until then, Arizona's children can count on professional educators like Michael Hicks to protect them. Do you think it'll be okay for the school district to have a Mexican American Studies program when the district is 100% Latino?
No.
But at that point, there'll be no white people left.
Well, if there's no more white people in the world, then okay, then you can do what you want.
Oh, don't worry, Mr. Hicks. We will. We will.
All right, I do want to get one I got a few more videos. I do want to get one reaction from one. Anybody get extra credit? I hear you get 50 points extra credit right now. Any thoughts, reactions to that video?
McCarthyism?
Tell me more.
Oh, well, nobody here would be old enough to remember, but yeah, there was such a fear of communism, socialism, that, you know, they would do whatever it took. The government would do whatever it took to abolish it.
And then went after the artists in particular.
Teachers. Oh, absolutely.
And ruined careers, no, I'm glad you brought that comparison up. I will add this
Friend who's
too.
a poet. She was fired from her school. Associates were fired for being linked in any way to the Communist Party. They were just activists, just free thinkers.
And I do want to add something too. So the people of Tucson, they should get all the credit for all of this because they created the gold standard in ethnic studies. They changed the dropout rate. They were sued, fired, and maligned. They should have been extolled. And they suffered the brunt of this. Our contribution was to contain it because we didn't want this to spread to other states. And let me paint an unrosy picture because that whole era was ugly. We would have been in bigger trouble in Texas if we found out about this after it was banned in Texas too. Because then we would have had two fronts, two legal fronts to fight. And that gets harder. Instead, because of the era that we're in and our all cultural capital, we invest Houston and invest our cultural capital to say, no way you're gonna spread this. And I'm gonna show you, so great. And we can talk more about that in a bit. We got either video. I'm gonna show you the video that we were very upset in Houston. And we created this video and the Libro Traficantes were launched. My name's Tony. You might have heard that Arizona had the audacity to ban Latino studies. Well, I'm here to introduce a few new words into the lexicon of Arizona, courtesy of the Protesters Handbook, written right here in Houston, Texas. First phrase, Libro Traficante. Me and my fellow Libro Traficantes will be smuggling contraband books back into Arizona this spring break, March 2012. If you want to get involved, visit the website, librotraficante.com. Second phrase, wet book. These are books that we smuggle illegally across the border to be used in underground classes where we will conduct Latino literary studies. It's a lethal dose of Dagoberto Gil coming at you, Arizona. Third phrase, dime book. These are paperbacks. They used to be worth only $10, but are now invaluable thanks to your fascist laws, Arizona. House on Mango Street, 25th anniversary edition by Sandra Cisneros. I heard she's leaving San Antonio. Maybe we can convince her to come live in Arizona. Contraband people. Arizona, we're throwing the book at you. V for victory, vatos. And that we premiered on our radio show. We had Sandra Cisneros call in, and then that helped us get into the campaign. I'm showing one video, and then we can take some questions, and we can dialogue. I can show you more videos. I wanted to show you us in action. So basically, I had 300 geniuses to choose from. 5 of us convened to co-found the Libro Traficante Caravan. And basically, if we're going to analyze it, we did 6 nuestras palabras in different cities. We had family already, and we activated it through the power of cell phones and social media. Again, I think that's the humanities training that we had. We made this up out of thin air, but there were structures in place that we could adapt, and we're translators. So how do we translate these complicated ideas to people? One thing was, and I want to get something straight. I understand why Arizona people supported this. Like if someone came up to me and says, "You want kids to overthrow the government?" Oh no, kids should not overthrow the government. Let me put that on official record. I am opposed to kids overthrowing the government. Sounds like a bad thing. Now, reading House on Mango Street? Yeah, that's a good thing. The two are not the same thing. So that's what they did, is to scare people. Our job as cultural accelerators and artists is to make it clear. It's like, no, that's not what you're agreeing to. It's this wonderful book that in Texas we love. So we love Sandra in Texas. We took that personally. So then our job then was to take what we did well and activate it. So I want to show you one of the stops. And the other thing, when you get into the laws, it gets murky. It gets very, very murky. They're arguing really minute points. One silly thing is, are these books banned or not? That's kind of like if someone's got a dagger to your throat, someone's like, that's really a switchblade. That's not really a dagger. You're like, okay, fine. But let me show you us on the road and then we can chat. So this is one of the stops. We did the caravan in 6 different cities. This was the stop in San Antonio.
And right now, I also want to introduce, if you remember the civil rights movement, it was based on poetry, art, literature. Only art could save us. And it really gives me a great honor to introduce someone that I looked up to and that I am humbled and honored to be able to call a friend. If you think of any other writers for our band, many of them were first published in her journals. And I remember her being an activist before we were even a demographic. She will be flowing for us tomorrow night at the Guadalupe. So I know in Tucson, Jan Brewer is having a skidipshit right now because she knows what's coming. It is an honor and pleasure to introduce La Mera Mera, Lorna D. Cervantes.
I love San Antonio. I love Texas. I love Tejanas. And I love Tejanos. I do not love the version of Texas history. I do not love the version of history I was given when I was in high school 40 years ago. 30 years ago, I celebrated the publication of my first book, Emplumada. After I had given a poetry reading and was a visiting professor, a visiting writer at Yale University. I was 21 years old, barely 21 years old. Couldn't even really drink yet. And 40 years ago, I am celebrating or commemorating my high school teacher asking me what I wanted to do when I grew up. And I said, I want to go to college. And she said, oh, what level? I said, PhD. And she said, oh, where do you want to go? I said, University of California, Santa Cruz. And she said, oh, what do you want to be? And I said, a university professor. And she just about swallowed her tongue. And right away she spit out at me, you are not college material. You will only fail. I do not think you should apply to Yale University or any university because you will only fail. This was based on nothing but the fact that I was Mexican American, because she had told my white boyfriend when he came to that school, Abraham Lincoln High School in San Jose, California, do not expect anything from this school. It is 86% Mexican. I knew this is where she was coming from. And I got mad. I got really mad. What did I do? I didn't blow anything up. I didn't set any fires. I didn't commit any vandalism. I didn't break anything. You know what I did? Because I was pissed off. I started doing my homework. When I was in history class 1A, we had the Brown Berets come into my high school, my history class, and read Lalo Delgado's Stupid America. And I sat there with my head gonging in the back of the room, sitting there all, chola out. And like I didn't really care, But I'm sitting there with tears in my eyes thinking, man, I do not want to die with 10,000 masterpieces hanging only from my mind. And I discovered Chicano literature then. And I discovered the literature of Texas writers. And Jose Antonio Murciaga. In 1980, I published his book, Drink Futura, with his, as broadsides. Because our people have an intimidation of the book, we were conquered with the book in one hand and the cross in the other, in a language that we did not understand. So I started reading, and I published Jose Antonio Burciaga, and I dedicated my life to getting this poetry out. Why? Because Chicano poetry saved my life. I am alive today. I am a university professor, 20 years at the University of Colorado, associate professor, director of creative writing my poetry that is banned in 5 of these anthologies here, including the poem I wrote and dedicated to my high school teacher called Home for the Young White Man Who Asked Me How I, an intelligent, well-read human being, could believe in the war between races. That poem is in over 100 anthologies, including the anthologies that are now not allowed in 3 states and not allowed in Arizona. And my poems that are in that book that was published 30 years ago in Plumada are now in test questions for the SAT. That means our Chicano students are not reading this poetry and they're not going to be able to pass these tests, these SAT tests, because somebody really stupid who hasn't even read these books, come on, House on Mango Street, what is controversial about red shoes? Huh? I have taught that book over and over and over again. As a matter of fact, I published Sandra Cisneros' first book, Bad Boys. If you have a copy of that I sold for $1, it is now worth $3,500 for one copy of that little chapbook. Sandra Cisneros, I recommend it, House on Mango Street. I am so proud that now it is in every school across the country, and now they're trying to ban it for what? Because it's good. It is excellent. It makes people think, and most importantly, it gives these students what Chicano poetry gave to me, pride. Pride and the truth of our history. We can read the documents in 2, 3, and all of our other native languages. Get it. Thank you very much. Please, please, please donate to this cause by band.
Pause and we can chat a little bit. But yeah, Brian Barras, High Tech Aztec shot it. You saw Lupe Mendes back there. We had about 30 people who gave up a week of their life. Again, that's cultural capital. I mean, they could have gone on spring break somewhere. They decided to get on a bus and smuggle the books. And we would go to a spot and define space. Like, we just got in front of the Alamo, but kind of like you're doing here, and set it up and then taped it and saved it. But yeah, I don't know if there's any questions, or we can chat.
Did they try to arrest you?
So, and just so you know too, this was a ton of fun. Okay, this was a lot of fun. We're crazy, but we're not stupid though. So literally we had lawyers on speed dial in every state. One of our first sponsors, and again, cultural capital. Houston Mexicans got money and their lawyers, so you know, and their doctors. So the Mexican American Bar Association in Houston was one of our first sponsors. So you know, and don't get me wrong, the community, they were making tamales and tortillas and donating $5, $10. But you know, when you got the Mexican American Bar Association drop 2 G's, you're like, what's up? You're like, oh man, you know, and other folks would be like, you know what, this is bad. Here's right. So we had. And my wife's also a lawyer as well, so we had a lot of fun. But I go over things like, here's what I want to say. She goes, you can't say that. That sounds false. That sounds slander. Might be libel there. This other one, I go, but I really want to say this. She goes, no, you can't say that because I'm dying, you know. And then also, so we had lawyers on speed dial. We had legal preparation. We had a bail fund. Additionally, at each event, we had embedded media. This is craziness, right? We had embedded media, and I would make it a point. When at an event, I would say, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming with us. We have the Texas Observer right here, Texas Monthlies right here, the Daily Beast is right here. And what I was thinking in my head is, yo, you want to go crazy on us, make us famous, and we're going to win at every level. Because I want to say, let's get something clear. In Texas, I mean, Mexicans used to get lynched, Mexicans get deported. Let me say one last thing about that as well. I have different privileges I have citizenship privilege. I was born here, you know, and we're chatting about this before. I think when they picked on the immigrants can't respond the same way Chicanos can respond because they can get deported, they can get intimidated. Again, we're talking about language, they might not have the language skills to respond. I have educational privilege as well. So basically, they weren't used to dealing with us. And it was fun, you know? So we didn't know being arrested. And last thing on that too, it's interesting too that the response was that the Arizona authorities did not confront us directly, but they would adjust their policies to our campaigns. So I could actually hack that, oh wow, this is working. Likewise, we get back to Texas, the same thing. That's a good operational question. Yes?
Well, I just want to say I'm from Dallas, Texas, so fellow Texas, I feel that. I have a couple of comments that will lead into a question. I think it's very interesting watching that Jon Stewart segment and how that professor or school board person, you know, because I think people today are kind of shocked kind of like where this administration has taken things, and especially I feel like war on Mexicans right now. And you can see it back in 2012 that this was lingering there, and the fact that he said something as egregious as like if this whole community is all Latino, you still can't like learn about this stuff. And I just found that very just kind of odd. You know, but lastly, I guess like my question is, you know, now that we are in this day and age today in this administration where everything's fake news, misinformation is going out, you know, I was reading on social media about like some schools in Texas, like rewriting history in these textbooks, basically saying how, you know, slaves, African slaves were brought over here and it was like an indentured servitude and all that stuff. And then it begs the question, you know, with this new reinterpretation of history and these new books, you know, do you think those kind of books should be banned? And, you know, kind of, you know, I understand provocative thoughts and different opinions and letting that be kind of a thing, but when we are dealing with like misinformation now, you know, should that stuff be banned? So yeah.
Great, and let's go back to Mr. Hicks, the school board representative, because you're right, there's a lot of, and actually in the opinion that overturns that law, they did cite a wave of politicians who used anti-immigrant sentiment, especially in Arizona at that time, to gain power. And not only does he mention that, you know, if there's none of us left, then you can, which is, you know, mind-boggling. But he mentioned, which is never in the class, you know, he implied that the teachers were teaching students to use violence. And that plays off several stereotypes. In fact, you're likening to things now. I want to liken that stereotype to the manifesto in El Paso that we're taking over. So it's a stereotype that we're taking over, and the stereotype is that we're violent. We're even violent when we're reading, you know? So those stereotypes are there. Now I think what's interesting is that Arizona has self-corrected in some ways. So that ban was overturned. I'll give you the good news and we'll deal with the other bad news. So Arizona self-corrected, even Sheriff Joe Arpaio, again, I can call him a convicted racist, that's not my opinion. He was convicted for profiling Latinos. That is the case. He was pardoned by President Trump, but he was voted out. Jan Brewer did not run again because she was voted out. So that law was overturned. Here's the good news in Texas too. Yes, there's some crazy histories out there. We went back and campaigned for ethnic studies in Texas. And it took, we started in 2012, right after this, and it picked up in 2014. Last year, the Texas State Board of Education, 10 Republicans and 5 Democrats voted unanimously to endorse Mexican American Studies statewide. And then, speaking of Dallas, one thing I want to point to, we live and breathe inclusivity, and that's going up to your other question about banning, because I'm still against banning. Even stuff I disagree with, I'm against all banning. I'm against all banning. I'm all pro-education though. I'm pro-education for teaching people to make up their minds and lead by example, because I can't be there banning I can't ban every single thing you'll be exposed to, you know. At some point you got to think on your own, you know, and we won't be here at some point, you know. But going back to Texas, we've always planted inclusivity. So as we campaign for ethnic studies, it might look like we're just championing Mexican American studies at the time, but when we pass a policy, it says, but also African American studies, Native American studies, Asian American studies. And this year, Dallas ISD created African American Studies curriculum, which in November, the Texas State Board of Education will be taking testimony on. And I just did a blog post, because it's not making news, but we're like, on Hispanic Heritage Month, we want to talk about African American studies, and Libro Traficantes, and we endorse 100% approving that. And Texas, wouldn't it be wonderful if Texas is the first state? Isn't that crazy? To endorse Mexican American Studies and African American Studies. Of course, we put the caveat, because if they mess with you like they mess with us, we're gonna be there on buses. So, let's get something straight, do it right, because it seems like a no-brainer to me. Going back to these other texts, that text was caught by, that made national news where a mom caught that in her son's textbook. They self-corrected. I'm not against banning it. And in fact, too, there's people that say terrible things that I totally disagree with. I'd rather they say it in public. I'd rather they take off their white hoods. I'd rather know who was under the white hood. I'd rather know what's in their heads and hearts, and then act from there and, decide my, business decisions, my intellectual decisions based on that, then relegating them to saying it in secret circles. The other thing I want to add too. Now, if you watch me on television, I'm not this magnanimous, because it's TV, and I'm arguing, and we get to arguments quickly, so I may seem a little more belligerent on television. And it's condensed. It's like a Twitter war, right, on TV. But this I like better because I do want to hear opposing views. Maybe I am off. Maybe I am not seeing something. I'd rather you be open to tell me that, and I can educate myself and say, oh, that's a great point. Immigration. Yeah, I don't want cartel members in the country. Yeah, that's a great idea. Let's keep, organized drug runners. Yeah, that makes complete sense. That's what you're scared of? Well, let's make something clear. I don't want that. I don't want that either. But by the way, how was your taco? Wasn't that pretty good? Yeah. Well, who's cleaning the kitchen? He's like, who built that house? So let's make things up. Let's come to it. And I will say, so anyway, I'm not against the all that fake news stuff, which is why our job is even more important. And actually, I was chatting about this earlier. I also don't like all these. I think there's a concerted movement to put stories out there to tell folks college degrees don't matter anymore. And I'm like, oh, I get this. When you finally get, black and brown people in colleges, you're gonna try and convince us that it's not important. By the way, not important anymore. I'm like, I have the most, impractical degree on earth, and MFA in creative writing, and I wouldn't trade that for the world. That's a long answer. I'm gonna give very short answers for any question. I will give a short answer. But by the way, let me think of your question first. There's a Chicano who's studying aerospace engineering, so for his birthday 2 years ago, he wanted a 3D printer. Not the least expensive one, because he likes to put it together back again. And he designed for his dad, that's my son, he designed for his dad the Libro Traficante bookmarker. And I'm like, this is pretty dope, son. I said, can we buy 100 off you? He goes, yeah, but it doesn't cost that much to make. I go, no, you gotta, put in there for the thinking. You gotta upprice us, So we bought 100 from him, and then for Nuestra Palabra, for our fundraiser 21st anniversary, we had the NP 100 Club. So people who donated $100 would get one of these, and we had 30 people, so 3 Gs. And my son's like, Dad, no, I said, son, this is how the industry works. So you can't buy these. I'm going to give one to Rich, so thank you so much. Be careful, you might get an FBI file if you're seen with that.
I already have one.
You already have it. Instead of this thick, it'll be this thick. And for the next question, if you want one, you can make up a question. I'll be happy to give my last one. For now, I got more. The last one I have in Buffalo. To the next question. text my son, nobody likes you so far. Yes.
How did you do like the, actually getting the books back into classrooms? Like, did you get them back into classrooms with teachers? Did you get any pushback from the educators that were actually teaching the curriculum? Like, how did you get the books back into the hands of the children?
That is a great question. As far as activism goes, there's several different lanes, and they called it diffused blame. Sometimes there's not one department to do this. Unfortunately, a lot of the original teachers from Tucson are no longer there. The ones that came up with the curriculum, again, some were fired, some were maligned, some were sued, some still work there. What I thought would happen after the law was overturned is they would implement the original curriculum. They have not. So that's the tragedy of that part. On the flip side, it has spread. And there's two arguments to that. One is without us, sometimes I think our community laments that we're not centralized. Well, we were. We're centralized so well and did such a good job that they went in and said, well, here's how we stop that. But now, again, you have the Texas movement in California, several large school districts, Los Angeles Unified School District. To graduate high school, you must take an ethnic studies course. They just had a bill that got up to the governor that almost made it mandatory statewide. It didn't pass this time. Other states have implemented ethnic studies. So that's the hard part. Even in Texas, even though they've endorsed it, it's in mixed market studies in more schools, but it takes a lot of infrastructure work to get it out. And what's your name?
Leanne.
Leanne, here you go, Leanne. Do you want this? Pretend? Yes, Leanne, ladies and gentlemen, please applaud for Leanne. Did you have an FBI file before this? Not yet. Pleasure, pleasure. So, I mean, we can chat, eat, more videos, read books to you. Rich, I will defer to your wisdom and judgment.
Well, if there are no more questions for Tony, we can have a little social hour with some food because you need to eat. I can put some videos on in the background. And thank you all for coming. And please take a flyer from the back. We have a whole series of events through November 7th. And one of the flyers has all of them with a QR code so your phone can remember it. Thanks.
Oh, hold on, and let me do one picture for our Twitter page. All right, everybody. Everybody smile. One of those will work. Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.